We're excited to announce the first ever, first of its kind higher education podcast conference brought to you by Edu Alliance, the EdUp Experience, and Podium. This is happening Saturday, July 12th at the University of Illinois Chicago campus. This is an in-person event, one day only, the first of its kind. This is for people working in and around higher education who are interested in starting a podcast, who may have a podcast, want to learn more about podcasting. So if you want to be there, please go to higheredpodcon.com. That's higheredpodcon.com to learn how you can get your early bird registration, see who the keynote will be, and how you can submit proposals to be a part of this amazing inaugural conference. So that again, go to higheredpodcon.com to learn more.
Welcome back, everybody. It's your time to EdUp on the EdUp Experience podcast, where we make education your business. This is Elvin Freitas, co-founder of the EdUp Experience. And today I get a special treat to be on the microphone. Usually I'm behind doing the production, but today I'm on the mic, and I'm very, very excited to bring back a co-host who's really, really good at asking questions. You got to go back and look at the episode he did with some other college presidents and check out the questions he had. But he is Kevin Harrington, and he's the co-founder and CEO at Rise Education. Kevin, how you doing?
I'm great, Elvin. Excited for our first podcast together.
Yeah.
Let's see how this goes.
And you're a co-host now, and you know what to do, not to introduce or talk about the guest before I introduce.
Correct. I've made that mistake before. Hopefully I've learned my lesson. But yeah, just really appreciate you all having me back. Really excited for this.
Absolutely. Fantastic. Okay, so I like to get right to it. I don't chit-chat that much like Joe does, but I like to get right to it. I want to introduce our guest. He is Malcolm Youngren, President and Chief Executive Officer at Pacific College of Health and Science. Malcolm, how you doing?
Doing great. It's great to be here. It's great to talk with you guys.
Did I pronounce your last name right? Because I have a horrible pronunciation problem.
No, that's perfect. Youngren.
Youngren. Okay, great. Youngren. I love it. All right, Malcolm. So let's get right into it right away. So tell us about what you do and how do you do it?
Well, Pacific College of Health and Science is the largest school of Chinese medicine, acupuncture, and integrative health in the United States. We have about 1,700 students. We have 1,200 acupuncture students, and we have about 300 nursing students and a couple hundred massage students. So our mission really is to educate and inspire compassionate leaders in traditional medicine and integrative health science. And there's never been a time when it's been more important than right now for that type of education. And we are a leader in it. And so we've been doing this since 1986. We have 3 campuses, one in sunny, beautiful San Diego, one right in the middle of the city, in the country in Chicago, and a third one in New York City. So we have 3 great locations, and we've been working on this for 40 years. We have produced an order of magnitude larger number of acupuncturists and Chinese medical providers than anyone else in the United States, and we're excited to do it.
Fantastic. Before I pass it over to Kevin, one of the things that I'm always curious to learn is your journey. Tell us about how you got there. What's your story, Malcolm?
Well, funny it is, I started as a kindergarten teacher. So I started as a kindergarten teacher in 1988 in New York City. And I went from there. I got interested in kind of educational policy and went to the Harvard Graduate School of Education. And from there, I got interested in computer science and how computers can be working. So in 1990, I went and studied artificial intelligence in education at a place called the Institute for the Learning Sciences, which was started by a guy named Roger Schenck. And we created some of the early AI kind of driven learning environments. And then from there, I kind of wandered to Anderson Consulting, which did a lot of this stuff back in the 90s. We created large educational simulations for General Electric and places like that. And then from there, I went to Educational Testing Service and ran large simulations and testing environments. From there, I actually went to Mexico and joined a place called Laureate and ran the online education for Latin America. And then from there, I went and joined Pacific and started working on their online doctoral program, which was started, about 10, 15 years ago. And we put that online. And then from there, in COVID, the president decided to retire, and I started in on that. So I can't say it's been a linear process, my journey, but it has been incredibly interesting, and it's interesting to see AI come back into the fray. Now nearly 30 some years since when I was studying AI back at the Institute for Learning Sciences. So it's been a great journey. Pacific is a phenomenal organization. We definitely believe in improving lives exponentially, so that the healing journey starts with the individual. And when you start studying Chinese medicine or holistic integrative nursing with us, the first thing you do is you kind of work on yourself. And then by working on yourself and then your patients and your patients' friends and relatives, it just expands exponentially. So we're excited to do that. And there's, never been a time when this has been more important to try to do this type of healing and health.
Yeah, absolutely. And I got to say, your demeanor matches what you're doing. So it's,
Oh, yeah?
Yeah, I think it's a perfect match. Go ahead, Kevin.
Yeah, I could easily take medical advice from you on this call right now. It's perfect. You've served as president and CEO of Pacific College of Health and Sciences since 2016, I think. And that's a period that's been marked by enormous shifts in both education and healthcare. The two places where you sort of sit at the intersection of. I'd love to know from your own vantage point, looking back at those last 9 years or so, like, what do you think have been the most important decisions you or your leadership team have made through that journey to sort of adapt and evolve to these two shifting landscapes underneath your feet?
I think there are two incredibly key components of what we've done in the last 9 years. One is due to COVID. So we had started on some online doctoral activities, and then COVID hit. And it was very hard, but we, pivoted the whole college, on a dime. So it started in March, and we spent the next 2 weeks figuring out, what does a clinical shift look like online? What does a clinical shift look like if you're actually not in front of the patient, taking pulse and things like that? How do you teach needling when you're not going to be in front of somebody? And we got really creative really quickly. And that was incredibly important to keep the college alive and the students engaged. And I think we did a great job with that. The interesting thing is that then unleashed a whole set of issues and concerns that we're still dealing with today. So previously, we were three really distinct. You can imagine Chinese medicine, not very much online, not very technically focused. We were three distinct campuses: San Diego, Chicago, New York. When we went online, New York students were taking classes in San Diego. San Diego students were taking classes in New York. Chicago students were taking classes all over the place. So you all of a sudden had all these scheduling issues. You had, if a student was unhappy in a class and they were taking it, even though they were a San Diego student in New York, with the dean was in New York, who had the authority to help figure that out? So it took us from three very distinct campuses to an online infrastructure that we're still dealing with the ramifications about scheduling, about protecting classes, about faculty development, faculty education, accommodations, how you deal with a student who may be in Chicago that you didn't know as a faculty member in New York. So it was a proud moment, I think, the way we pivoted, and we had a lot of some experience online. But it's been amazing how those decisions in 2020 we're still trying to sort out in 2025. And I don't think we're going to sort them out completely for a while more, because they're just deep, deep issues that we need to figure out. Now our program went from 0 online. Now we're just under 50% online. So you are having faculty who are practitioners of Chinese medicine, which is not known for its technical, cutting edge, teaching online and doing clinicals online. And we are now we have like grand rounds where you have a patient case and you have practitioners who are luminaries. We can bring them in from China. We can bring them in from Europe, and they have a ground rounds case online, which is amazing. But, now we have employees all over the world. We've gone from employees in 3 states to employees in 26 states and 8 countries, ramifications for just HR armaments. So I would say that was one. The other intersection is the intersection of what's happening in healthcare. So in healthcare in the United States, it's $3.8 trillion with a T that the country spends on healthcare. 90% of that money, 90, is spent on chronic illness and disease, obesity, heart disease, cancer, things that don't go away, but have to be managed. So the country is moving from an infectious disease model where you find it and fix it to a chronic disease model where you manage it. Managing things are right at the forefront of what Chinese medicine has always been about. It's about finding balance, balance between the mind, the body, the spirit. We teach psychoneuroimmunology, which is a connection, the technical connection, chemicals, et cetera, between the mind and the body. And so that is really coming into the forefront. We have the Association for Complementary or for Integrative Medicine. 15 years ago, maybe there were 8 hospitals, major hospitals in it. Now there are 90 hospitals. All the major hospitals are trying to figure out how they deal with integrative medicine. If you have a patient with cancer, the side effects with chemotherapy are immense. Acupuncture is phenomenal with that. So they're trying to figure out how you bring in complementary, alternative medicine, traditional medicine. We have a whole program on medical cannabis and how you deal with medical cannabis. And cannabis is becoming, a component of that. Cannabis is great for nausea and having people then, eat more in terms of what they're trying to do if they're on chemotherapy. So the intersection of Western medicine and Eastern medicine under an umbrella of kind of interconnected and interdisciplinary holistic medicine is kind of really what is emerging very rapidly in the last 15 or so years. Most major medical centers, NYU in New York, New York Presbyterian, Memorial Sloan Kettering, all have integrative health disciplines and areas. And so it's an exciting time to really kind of be at that intersection of East and West, the intersection of the interconnection between the mind, the body, and spirit, and to really view that health has moved away from just the absence of disease, but really has meaning and is the balance of the mind, the body, and the spirit in terms of what you want to do as a goal. So if you're 98 years old, your view of health and wellness is vastly different from if you're 22 years old. And what you want to do with that has meaning, and the patient needs to be in the driver's seat of that. So those are 2 massive shifts that I think have happened in the last 10 years that that higher ed and healthcare are going to be dealing with for a long time.
Yeah, makes total sense. One sort of related question was inspired by just looking at your LinkedIn profile. My first reaction was, wow, this guy's done a lot of different things. All at sort of this like rough intersection thematically of online learning, traditional education, but in different geographies, different subsectors, et cetera. When you took over this presidency, or even started at Pacific College originally, because you weren't originally the president, you started at one of the campuses. What advice would you have for maybe new presidents or new campus leaders who are stepping into a role for the first time? Maybe even they come from like a different sector or very radically different experiences. Like, how did you get up to speed quickly? How did you equip yourself to be able to lead this campus so effectively in an efficient manner?
I think the biggest misconception is that leadership is driven from the top down in some type of military activity. Leadership really comes from the bottom up, and it comes from listening to people. The first thing I did is had listening tours. I went around to the campuses, listened to the campuses, and tried to listen to what was going on. And then just tried to get to work in terms of mechanics of trying to make people's lives better, the faculty, the staff, and do that. So I think there's one is just the misconception that leadership is top down driven. It is, in my mind, much more bottom up driven and earned over time. I think that's one thing. I think the other thing that is happening right now is that the student profile is changing. It's much more of an activist student profile. It's much more of a participatory student. The students really want to participate in the governance of colleges. Faculty want to do that more too. And it's a fine line between, the role of the Board of Trustees, the role of the administration, and the role of the students and the other constituent stakeholders. It's a hard line I think, to get into in terms of allowing people enough participatory activity that they feel engaged and they're driving, helping, but understanding that there's a Board of Trustees that has legally requirements that they have got to do, the fiduciary activities that they do, governance, liabilities, etc. So I think it's my advice to someone, one is just listening, going on a listening tour, and two is really working with people to understand how each group can kind of contribute. But there are real lines, and I think when we're finding students who are very, very active right now, especially over the last few years, and very politically active, et cetera, trying to find and educate them that there are legal structures and there are rules and responsibilities and boundaries that have to happen. And it's a tough thing to get across. A lot of times you kind of get into some discussions with students and faculty that are kind of tough.
Yeah, I can only imagine. Again, sort of going back to your LinkedIn, it's clear, and even just hearing your story about being involved with AI facilitated learning before most people even knew what AI probably was, or certainly before we were reading it in the news every single day. It's clear that you developed somehow a really strong conviction in the power of technology-enabled learning and how that was going to change over the next 10, 20, 30 years. That story, seems to have played out in sort of that fashion where, even just your own institution's gone from 0 to close to 50%. And the same can be said of a lot of other institutions across the country. Standing in your seat today, looking toward the next 10 or 20 or 30 years, do you think that there's going to be similarly impactful transformations that technology causes across higher education and the landscape? Or do you feel like we've kind of hit like a decent static equilibrium where, there's going to be more, navigation, more migration toward online learning, but for the most part, the system as a whole will look reasonably similar for the next 10 to 15 years?
In many ways, I hope it doesn't look similar to the way it does right now. Not that anything's bad with it, but there's so much more to be done. I mean, the world is a global world, and to be able to use education and technology like we are, where we're bringing a practitioner from China to do a case study with students in Chicago and New York, is unprecedented. I mean, we would never be able to do that before. And to have world experts, like we have a world expert in London on dermatology, and he does, kind of office hours and activities online. So I think there's, the world of education, I think, is going to expand tremendously and continue to expand tremendously globally. I think that's one trend that's not going to stop. The other trend is what's happening in AI. AI is obviously going to revolutionize it, and Khan Academy is leading the way in terms of being able to have discussions and dialogues with fictitious characters and historical characters. That whole world is only gonna expand tremendously. The world of virtual reality is going to expand tremendously. We have a nursing program. We have about 300 students in it. One of the biggest constraints that we have are clinical placements. There's no reason that more and more clinical placements are not going to be done through virtual reality, through virtual case studies, and that whole world is going to to kind of move on up. All the hospitals in New York are in desperate need of nurses. They're all 100 to 200 nurses shy. They're all running at 85% staffing and 110% of capacity. So the nurses are working morning, noon, and night. We need more of them. We need more that are incredibly well trained. And putting the throttling constraint of only clinicals is just really not functional in this day and age. So I think there's one theme of just being global, and I think that's going to continue to increase and to grow tremendously. I think there's another theme of just artificial intelligence and what it means. I mean, I know our CIO was trying to work on some stuff with, and it's like a conversation that he has with Chat GPT. He turns it on and he speaks to it and it speaks back to him, and they're trying to set up, different configurations of servers and things like that. That world is only just barely being scratched, and then there's the world of virtual reality that, and all these things have been around for a long time. I mean, I remember some of the early, dispensations from the government around distance education that were done in the 90s. And those, have brought us to where we are, 25 years later. And I think if you look at the long trajectory of higher ed, I mean, people say it doesn't really change. It's always the same thing, but I think it has changed, and I think it's going to change even more. It's not blackboards. It's not, it's not really the lecturer at the front of the classroom anymore. You have Minerva, an incredible, experiment that's out there. You have Grant, you have the Western Governors, another incredible activity. Rise, what you guys do, equally is interesting and phenomenal. So there are new models that are being brought up, but I think that globalization, AI, and virtual reality are going to be certainly three themes that are going to be very strong and will continue to expand and change higher ed over the next 20, 25 years easily.
Yeah, you mentioned that that sort of bottleneck in being able to find enough nurses as one example of many you could probably give. That from a total outside perspective like my own, it's puzzling. These are really well-paying jobs. They're deeply meaningful jobs. Why do we have a shortage is at least from my perspective, a pretty interesting question. If you were in charge of that problem at the United States government level, what would be the major things you'd be changing? And maybe it's a legislative move that needs to be made, or maybe it's higher ed institutions need to do a better job of providing that, or maybe it is as simple as just sort of clinicals and a lack of supply there. Like, what is the nature of that bottleneck at the end of the day? And is there anything that can be done, especially by higher education institutions or just generally, to actually solve that?
Higher Ed PodCon is coming. Go to higheredpodcon.com. That's higheredpodcon.com to learn more.
Well, I mean, first I would say we want to move cautiously in this area. Nurses, doctors are at an incredibly important point in anyone's, health journey, and we don't want to rush into it. But I would certainly say that, what we find the biggest bottleneck is the ability to have the academic preparation necessary to deal with the biosciences and the sciences that we're dealing with. So in our campus in New York, every 4 months, we'll get about 4,000 leads. We'll get about 1,000 leads a month. We will receive about 700 applications, and we will enroll about 70 people. the vast majority of that whole whittling from 4,000 down to 70 is academic preparation to deal with the sciences. And so, we have a test called the TEAS test, which is ATI, which is a standardized, test, and getting people to be able to reach the mean of that in the United States, which is a 68, weeds out a tremendous amount of people. So I think that right now the biggest bottleneck is the ability for preparation. And I think there are kind of two ways to look at that. One way to look at that is to drive further into the middle schools and even the elementary schools, what it means to have that job. Because in New York, the starting salary for a nurse is between $125,000 and $155,000 a year. That's a brand new BSN nurse, $125,000, $150,000. That is life-changing, salaries for people that are immigrants, first generation into the United States. Those are really life-changing, dollars. And so our curriculum, we worked hard on to make sure it's efficient. It is the degree costs $120,000, but the degree all in $120,000, and you get a job at $120,000. The return on investment after you do Pell, TAP, all those is amazing. So we need to, be better at describing why are you doing these sciences in middle school and why do you need to keep up the preparation so that when you get to college, you're prepared to actually go into these schools. And then two is I think we need to continue to reevaluate what does it really mean? What is the level of science you really need? And what are the skills, attitudes, and knowledge that you need to have to become a nurse? It's changing dramatically. And I think there are historically probably a lot of old ideas about nursing and nursing education, some of that kind of hazing, the shift structure, et cetera, that is, needs to be changed. So I think there are really two strategies. One is to drive down into elementary school, the knowledge of why you're doing all this science so that you can be prepared for these kind of life-changing salaries. If you're a first generation, person in the United States. And second, I think that we need to continue to look at the practices and requirements of becoming a nurse and make sure that they are realistic and they're not just vestiges of the past era when there were different world and different backgrounds.
Yeah, super interesting. So my company Rise works with about 115 colleges, many of which are looking at the demographic changes in America right now. Fewer and fewer over the next 10 to 20 years here, traditional undergraduate residential students. And the obvious conclusion for a lot of them is we need to expand. We need to do more things. We need to diversify our revenue streams because this one that we've sort of been based on for 150 years or more is shrinking. You are an institution and a leader who has clearly not shied away from being on the bleeding edge and innovating and expanding into new stuff. I've seen you've talked in the past about sort of mission-oriented innovation. You mentioned the expansion to cannabis science, holistic nursing. I know you guys have been at the forefront of. And so one place I think that could benefit a lot of leaders, at least that we talk to, is to hear how you think about, where to place those bets. I imagine there's 10, 20, 30 different opportunities that could theoretically make sense for Pacific to expand into. How do you whittle that down to the one or two bets you're going to make at any given time and really broadly figure out where do you want to be innovative, for the next 3 years?
Yeah, I mean, we try to do two things. One of which you mentioned is that we try to stick to our knitting, that we are good at traditional medicine. We are good at holistic medicine. We would not be good at an MBA. We would not be good at, traditional engineering. So we try to stick to our knitting and understand where our brand is strong. So our brand in Chinese medicine, integrative health is strong. We're in hospitals. We are, through our acupuncture, we're in the University of California in San Diego. We're in the Veterans Administration. We're at NYU. So we have a good, strong brand, but a brand that is focused on integrative health and traditional medicine. So we start with that point that we need to do something that is mission focused, and builds on our brand. And then we really take a new product development process where you start with just writing, you try to solicit ideas from a lot of different people. And we write kind of one pagers. What would this be? What would this new product look like? What would the new degree look like? Why is it important? Why does it fit into our portfolio? What's the kind of rough need that you would think about having go with? And then from there, we eventually will build up to a full business plan. We'll engage marketing companies. There are many that are out there that can help with some of the marketing aspects of it. And then we will try to do it in as cost efficient way as possible to make sure that there's market demand for it. And we haven't always been, completely successful. We had a health and human performance master's degree that didn't really fly. And we have had, others that have. So we do a portfolio approach. We do a approach where you start with one pagers, and then you kind of go up to business plans, and then you launch it from there with kind of rigorous marketing, et cetera, on the back end. And throughout it all, it really has to be mission and brand focused. Otherwise, there are just too many other schools that are out there that are too big and are too, all encompassing. There's a lot of articles that are talking about, the mammoth, schools that are coming, the Arizona State universities, et cetera, that are really just dealing with scale and you're not going to compete against scale. You're not going to compete against customer service with the Western Governors that has that many students in it. You're not going to compete with admissions process that's going to be as efficient or effective as Western Governors. But if you have a brand that marks out where you are in the world, integrative, holistic, then that's where you're going to be. I think also our brand is a little bit kind of cutting edge. I mean, we are not, if you're going into Chinese medicine, acupuncture, you're inherently alternative. You didn't go into the medical system as it currently is. You wanted to go into the alternative medical system. So I think our brand is also somewhat kind of cutting edge and on that. So we got to stay true to that as well. And then, I would just say the final thing is if you connect to the brand and the mission, it's really empowering to the faculty and to the staff that are working there, because they're not working at a college just for the money. They're working at it for something much broader in mission, et cetera. And that's a big piece of what we're doing.
Makes perfect sense. I'm going to take a risk with asking you this next question that you might be sick of getting at this point. And it's around AI. And I know a lot of our college leaders we work with are trying to think about, depending on who you ask or who you listen to, really, AI might cause a once in a generation, once in many generations shift in sort of like what are the skills needed to be successful in the modern economy. And I imagine that question applies to healthcare as much as it does any other sector. When you think about, making Pacific College resilient to whatever changes do occur there, that I don't think anyone has a crystal ball on. Like, are there things that college leaders can be doing today to position themselves as best as possible for that future uncertain world? Or is the answer right now, it's honestly too early, wouldn't spend too many, brain cycles thinking about it, just stay close to the hoop, keep reading, keep using these tools. And as the picture becomes clear, you can start to make adjustments and decisions.
Yeah, I would say, one, I have been kind of tangential in the world of AI for a long time. And, Roger Schenck, I don't know if you guys know Roger Schenck, but Roger Schenck he headed up Yale's artificial intelligence lab in the 60s. He was a major figure in artificial intelligence. He went and started this Institute for Learning Sciences at Northwestern and has been working a lot on kind of AI for a long time. And I think the biggest piece is that if you think about, like there's another guy, Howard Gardner at Harvard, who had this view of 7 types of intelligence. There's emotional intelligence. There's interpersonal, intrapersonal, physical, and then you kind of get to mathematical and linguistic. So if you kind of look at Howard Gardner's view of intelligence, 7 types of intelligence, AI is going to do really well at 2 of them. It's going to do well at mathematical. It's going to do well at linguistics. But, we're approaching tax day, and AI will never pay taxes. AI will never be a father or a mother or give birth. AI will never understand what it's like to move through the physical world like humans do. There's so many things that AI will never ever do that to get too worried about it being something that's going to take over as a human or some type, I think is not really where I would focus. I would focus on, there are literally 7 types of intelligence that Howard Gardner defined at Harvard years ago. And linguistic and mathematical, it's going to do really well at. And we need to figure out how to create tools, et cetera, that accelerate our knowledge and our abilities. But, spatial intelligence, intrapersonal and interpersonal intelligence are things that it's never going to be able to touch. So focus on the intrapersonal, the interpersonal, the spatial, those types of intelligence. And they're going to become more and more valuable. The world of a nurse in the future is going to be heavily technically, enabled. AI will identify mammograms and breast cancer better than most anybody looking at it technically. But they can't have the next discussion with the patient about what they need to do. They can't talk with them about what they feel like, to know that their life may have an earlier termination and death than they thought. So those pieces are the interpersonal, the intrapersonal, in Howard Gardner's view, are never going to be taken over by AI. And, I think that people kind of focus on a lot of that, but I think every job has that. There's the emotional intelligence of a leader, being able to read a room, understanding your people. Those are things that are never going to go away. And I don't think that AI will impact those, but there are certainly things that it's going to do far better than a human can. And I remember when, in one of the discussions with Roger Schenck back at the Institute for Learning Sciences, we used to have these kind of round discussions on Fridays, and one of the people defending their dissertation was talking about how this AI component is going to be so much better than a human in this specific aspect that was very technical. And I remember Roger saying, that's a problem. I mean, that's not really necessarily intelligence. That is computational ability, that's other things, but that's not really intelligence as a human would have it. We as humans are much more holistic, and you take a big picture at things. The computer will always go through faster computations than we will. So I think it's going to change the world of education. I think I love, the Khan Academy, what they're doing with it, being able to have discussions with people and have it try on different personas. But it's never going to do these things that are human. I mean, it's never going to know that it's mortality, that you're going to die. You're never going to have a kid. You're never going to have a mother. You're never going to have all these things, interpersonal, intrapersonal, spatial, all those things it's never going to understand. It's never going to deal with. So I think you need to worry about it, but you need to worry about it and how you're going to teach in 2 of 7 intelligences.
So, unfortunately, we're coming up on time. Great insights, Malcolm. Fantastic questions, Kevin. Kevin, I'll give you one more question, and then I'll follow with the last 2.
Perfect. One piece of leadership that I often think doesn't get as much airtime as it probably deserves is hiring. And how do you find the people who are ultimately going to do most of the work? It's probably the most important decision a lot of leaders make, and you're certainly someone who's had plenty of experience with that. When you think about who you're going to bring in to your campus or at Laureate or at any of these experiences, like, how do you go about hiring? What tips would you have for people? What are the sorts of things you're looking for in the next great leader you're going to bring into Pacific College?
One is passion and attitude. passion, attitude, are things that are table stakes. Integrity is table stakes. I think, some of the skills you can build, but whether someone has passion, attitude, integrity are not things that you could build. When I interview people, people can outwit me quickly in an interview, but it's the references that I spend a lot of time on. Who are the references? What are they? And talking with their references. The references will give away more information in terms of the great candidates and those that are less great. So I focus a lot on references, and I focus a lot on passion, attitude, and integrity. Those are the things that are most important to me.
Yeah, I just want to piggyback on that. I've always said that too, Malcolm. It's like, if you got a good attitude, we can help you. We can train you up with the skills, is all that stuff. Especially now when employers are paying for all of that, skilling up, which is great. All right, so let's get to the last two questions, Malcolm. Did we miss anything during the conversation that you would want to talk about? If so, feel free to do that. And last question, what do you see as the future of higher education?
I think no, I don't think there's been anything that we've missed so far. It's been a great conversation. I think the things that are the future of higher education has two real components. One is cost. If you look at the confidence that the general population has in higher ed, it's gone down to, I think, 36%, and I think 10 years ago it was 60%. There are a lot of reasons for that. A lot of them can be political. A lot of them can be what's happening on the campuses, a lot of that. But when I talk to students and faculty and parents, I mean, it's cost. It is the return on the investment. If you're going to an Ivy League now, it's like $300,000 to get the degree. It is astronomical. And one of the things that we actually did during COVID is we put a lot of the back office into Honduras. So we kind of took a page from the playbook of industry and said, listen, we're now in a global world. We have faculty that are coming from China. Why do we have transfer credit evaluators in the United States when we can have them in Honduras and pay them, a lot less, and great jobs for those in Honduras and great output from us? So we worked with a company called EdUp Loft, and it was run by a great CEO, Fernando Cruz. And we now have about 20% of our administrators are in Honduras. So the people that do all of our transfer credit evaluations, people that all do all the, uploading of paperwork, doing all registration analysis, all that kind of tech support, it's all done there. And I think when universities start thinking about what their future is, cost and driving down costs is going to have to be important. And I think we're going to have to look towards some of the things that industry did in terms of placing functions around the world in different locations that drive down cost as low as possible. At the same time, what we deal with in Honduras is a great customer service. It's one of the bigger call centers in the Americas, and they have great customer service. So we drove down costs and drove up, satisfaction. So I think there's that is a big piece of it. And then I think, I think technology. We're working. We're a beta customer in a really cool company called TC Evaluator, which does transfer credit evaluations, and it's done with AI. So you use AI to scan in, transcripts and catalogs, and then they do the AI does the first pass of all transfer credit evaluations. And when you look at a school like us, we have 1,700 students. We have 8 people full time doing transfer credit evaluation. When I heard Southern New Hampshire University has 300 people doing transfer credit evaluations. It's only one function of many functions that really can be, more efficiently done by AI. So I think in many respects, the biggest question is we have one of the most diverse amazing systems of higher education in the world. The diversity is the strength of the higher education system in the United States versus anywhere in the world. The Achilles heel right now is cost. And we just got to figure out how to get costs down. So my vision for the future would hopefully be that the diversity will create competition. The competition will figure out ways to drive down the cost. And two of the ways, one is to be something like, EduTech Loft in Honduras with Fernando, and the other would be like TC Evaluator. But we got the greatest educational system. I think people are losing confidence because of the cost. Other political things aside, big piece is the cost. And they're not seeing the return on investment. You're going to put $300,000 into something, the return on investment needs to be clear. And is there a way to drive that cost down?
Yeah, I mean, Malcolm, again, incredible insights, and I agree, especially with those transfer credits. That's a big topic now. Thanks for shouting out those different companies, because I'm sure people listening would appreciate that, want to look into that. So before I outro my co-host, Kevin, I just want to say, Kevin, any thoughts about this conversation?
I would just want to reiterate everything Malcolm just said. I think cost. ROI is totally broken, and the unfortunate reality is that it makes for some very difficult choices. Having to reduce your budgets and right size things for this new student demographics, etc. But we owe it to America to try to do that, and for this next generation of students. Otherwise, they're just going to get more and more disillusioned, and it's going to be even more painful. So.
Yeah, RISE is right up in the middle of the innovation that's happening in the United States.
Trying to be.
A lot of credit to you guys to what you're doing, and it's going to be a big piece of what we can do in the future. I mean, there's a lot of great stuff that's happening on the campus, but giving the kind of computer science kind of degrees that you guys enable, incredible.
Yeah, thank you. But yeah, it's been great, Alvin. Absolute pleasure. Malcolm, been so fun getting to pick your brain here, so I appreciate the opportunity.
It was fun with you guys too.
Amazing. So that is Kevin Harrington. He is co-founder and CEO at Rise Education. Thank you so much, Kevin. And your guest today was Malcolm Youngren, President and Chief Executive Officer at Pacific College of Health and Science. Malcolm, thank you so very much.
Thank you guys so much. It's been a pleasure.
And with that, ladies and gentlemen, you've just EdUp.
Did you buy your tickets yet? Higher Education's first podcast conference is coming July 12th. Go to higheredpodcon.com, higheredpodcon.com. Get your tickets.